We've heard a lot about this, haven't we, over the last couple of weeks in particular, but really over the last few years. Now, behind me you've got a graphic showing the Arctic ice and the melt. It starts out in 1989, then we move on 10 years to 1999, and then let's move it on another. And you can see, highlighted by that white circle, where the ice is now. All these images, by the way, taken during the month of September, when that Arctic sea ice is at its lowest. That is when the ice has retreated further. So, as you say, what is the impact in particular? What is the impact to the polar bear? Because we've all been hearing how, of course, their habitat is indeed diminishing. Well, our very own Jessica Ellis, she actually took a trip up into that part of the world to find out for herself exactly what is happening to the polar bear.
Because the Hudson Bay, which is a part of the Arctic Ocean, dips way down into the central part of Canada here, the Arctic actually does not follow an east to west line, say the 60th parallel, but actually comes way down into central Canada and brings all that cold water and that ice mass down with it. And that's what holds the bears here as well. That's why we have polar bears so far down into Canada. And certainly there does seem to be the higher Arctic areas that are ice-free that haven't been for years. The elders, the Inuit elders, are talking about how there's no ice where there has always been ice in their entire lifetime. So it certainly would appear that some things are changing.
The polar bears here are just amazing. To actually get in close to a largest land carnivore in the world is a pretty amazing experience.
I come out here to photograph polar bears simply because they're, to me, the most beautiful animal in the world. You feel like you're on their territory, and I think it creates a greater respect for the animal in you because you know that we're now on equal terms. I've been coming to the north quite frequently since 1980. We are north of Churchill, across Hudson Bay. It's a spot north of the Seal River where polar bears seem to gather in the fall, waiting for the ice just as they do at Churchill.
It's pretty dangerous, but we try and minimize the risks as much as we can by watching bear behavior, watching the animals as we're approaching, and looking for signs of stress.
My name is Mike Reimer, and together with my wife Jeannie, we own and operate Seal River Heritage Lodge, which is a division of Churchill Wild. Our bear population here is estimated to be between 800 and 1,200, depending who you're talking to and what the latest count is.
At the moment, we're surrounded by bears. There's one over there, there's one over here, there's one here, and there's one over here. So we're just looking all around and taking many photographs.
In general, I have seen more skinny bears, perhaps, than we used to. And yet, this last winter was really good for the bears, so they're looking exceptionally well.
They'll be out on the ice until basically mid-July again of next year. And the bears further north will actually have quite a bit more time to spend on the ice where the seals are. So come mid-July, they'll be making their way back to Seal River Lodge and Churchill.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. And of course, joining me now is our very own Jessica Ellis. Now, Jessica, first of all, what was it like actually being on the ground, being so close to those polar bears?
Well, it's pretty rare being able to photograph on the ground at that eye level, right? We were so close to them, we could really creep up and stand by. And you saw that, we had guards, and it was safe. But the opportunity really is open to the public. I mean, I found on the web a site called Churchill.com. Churchillwild.com, and you see it on the screen right now, and they propose that you can view polar bears at ground level. Jenny, usually you have to go out by boat or go on a tundra buggy. It's this big, huge, oversized 3 times the size of a Hummer, basically, out to view these polar bears. So it was quite a unique experience. And within your graphic, what you just showed, we were in Churchill, or actually just north of Churchill, a small flight north of Churchill. And Churchill is along the Hudson Bay. So where that Arctic region and all of that polar bear, all of the ice is melting, the Arctic ice goes down into this region, and that's what brings the polar bears into the Hudson Bay. And Churchill is actually even called by some, probably all in Churchill, the polar bear capital of the world.
Well, there's a lot there, aren't there? I mean, can we see some of your images whilst you tell us some of the facts about polar bears? Because it's actually very fascinating, the numbers, I think, for a start, that are involved.
Absolutely. And it's incredible to see, to view the images. There's some of the images that I took out there. And this, I took that with a 25 millimeter lens. That's about 3 feet away, if you can imagine.
Yeah.
But polar bears are potentially endangered species, and they're living in the circumpolar north. That's what you showed in your graphic. And they are the world's largest land predators. They're mostly out on the sea ice hunting for seals. And the bears pad across five countries. They pad across Russia, to Alaska in the U.S., Canada, Greenland, and onto Svalbard in Norway. And biologists estimate that there's about 20,000 to 25,000 polar bears, with about 60% living in Canada, so predominantly in Canada. And I also learned that there are 19 subpopulations, and 8 of those are currently decreasing, 3 are considered stable, and 1 is increasing. And all of this information that I found out about is from Polar Bears International, and it's an organization that studies these polar bears and their habitat in the north. So a lot of interesting information, mixed reviews.
Yeah, exactly. Now, we're in December now. You were there a month ago. So we know they move about. You've just said the continents, they go to the different countries. So where do they go at this time of year? Where are those polar bears that you saw a month ago now?
They are no longer there. They're no longer on the coast. They are out on that ice. And they will be out there until July. And they'll head back down onto the coast within Churchill. Now, in the northern region, the polar bears they are able to spend longer amounts of time on the Arctic ice because they're not closer to the coast. But that's where the mixed reviews come from, because that is the region that's predominantly melting. That's what the scientists say.
Yeah, no, it's all fascinating stuff. And as usual, Jessica, you brought us another very, very interesting story. So thank you very much for that. I'm sure we'll be hearing from you again with something else soon. And Anjali, again, it just goes to say what Jessica was saying, that area behind me showing up on the area of the map, that is where we're talking about perhaps the diminishing population of polar bears because of the potential of that rapid ice melt.